Hey everyone, it's Mark from eatsleepdrums here. I just thought it might be interesting to do a short video on my philosophy and approach for mixing drums. Now, obviously, it changes, depending on the genre. But I thought this particular track exhibited my own technique fairly well. It's a band called Those Ghosts from Ireland, great friends of mine, and they have a new single coming out called Lemon Milk. And basically, they were looking for that big American rock sound. So I'll just take a look at what we've done here in terms of setup. Now, we have quite a lot of tracks here, two kick mics, kick sample, which is muted at the moment, snare top and bottom, two supplementary snare samples, and then you have hats, rack floor, a pair of overheads, and a pair of room mics. On top of that, we have a dedicated drum bus. Now, what's interesting about that is that I do not output my drum tracks to the drum bus. I send to the drum bus, and all the sends are set at 0 to that particular bus. So essentially, the sends are following my fader movements here. If I was to, for example, increase the snare top mic, it'll be reflected in the amount that's been sent to the drum bus. On top of that, I also have a dedicated bus just for my kick and snare channels, and that includes the samples as well. They also get bused to that. It's a pretty cool feature. I'll talk more about it when we audition the tracks. But essentially, I'm using that, as you can see, as a means of dialing in quite a lot of top end snap to both the kick and snare. And I think in this instance, I've also bussed the toms. Yep, I have. I've bussed the toms to that particular bus as well. Really, really cool trick. And it's just basically a fader for adding extra brightness and snap to your drum mix without having to really dial in so much top end on the individual channels. But first of all, we'll take a quick listen to the tracks as they are. Now, I've done quite a bit of processing so far. I'm not going to go into all that in this particular video. I'll do that in a later video, but I just want to give a general overview of my workflow. So here we are, minus the samples, minus the reverbs. I have two reverbs set up, a dedicated room, and then this drum verb, which is acting basically, a CLA snare preset there. It's just a general reverb for extending the tail of the likes of the snare drum. But again, I'll talk more about that in a moment. So here we are, samples muted, room and drum verb muted, drum bus and the kick and snare bus muted. So here we are. Okay, well, everything's there. It's a decent balance. It's quite punchy, but I don't think it's going to compete whenever you add in, a load of multi-track guitars. We've got distorted bass, and this track, the vocals quite gritty sounding. So I don't think that drum sound is going to work in the track. Now, what I have done, I've added a series of samples. All my samples are one-hit samples. They don't follow the dynamics of the performance. They are literally one-shot samples, kicks and snare drums. The reason I do that is with the samples, what I am looking for is some extra top end snap, and the kick drum here we have some bottom end as well, but I'm looking for that consistency. The samples obviously are going to be at the one level. They're not going to vary in terms of dynamics. The close mics will give you that, depending on the player. There'll be a certain amount of shift in the dynamics. So when you layer in the one-hit samples, it's the best of both worlds. You have the consistency of the samples and then the real live feel of the close mics and the player. Now, something interesting about the snare samples as well, I don't bus any of my close snare mics to the reverbs because invariably there'll be some hi-hat, toms, cymbal leakage, and that's all going to the reverb sends, and it can clutter things up. It can be quite messy. So as well as using my snare samples for added, top end, as you can see, just bringing out the transient, they're also my means of generating reverb on the drums, by extending the tail. So we'll add in the samples. Well, before we do, just a quick reminder of how things sound. So as you can hear, plenty of dynamic variation. We'll add in the 2 snare samples and the kick sample, and we'll add in the 2 reverbs. So here we are now. So that's quite a difference, as I'm sure you'll agree. There's just instant depth. You can still hear that the close mics are poking through. It doesn't sound, you don't get that machine gun effect that you can sometimes get whenever you fully replace a signal with a sample. Now, I'm not doing that here. I'm preserving the integrity of the original performance. The dynamics are still there. The close mics are way up in the mix. We're matching them then with the samples just to get the consistency right for this particular genre, because that's what it requires. And then we're also getting the sense of depth by sending to the reverbs from the snare drum samples. So the next thing we can look at is the drum bus itself. Now, what I'm using on the drum bus is the Slate VBC Grey. This thing is absolutely amazing. It emulates the bus compressor on the SSL 4000. Ubiquitous again. It's just put it on. There's your record across the master bus, but it works amazingly well on drums. So following that, as you can see, again, loads and loads of top end at 5k, and quite a bit well, that's actually quite a bit lower than I'd like. We're looking at on around 60 hertz. Quite a bump there as well. So basically this is acting as like a hi-fi control. We're bringing out more of the snap, more of the transient, and we're also giving a bit of heft at the bottom end and some brightness at the top. So a bit like our kick and snare aux, which we'll get to in a moment. This is basically, a means of brightening up your drum mix, and very, very useful for when you hit the chorus and you're being bombarded with extra guitar parts. This is great for giving the drums a bit of a push and just a lift sonically, so that they can compete with those extra instruments. So I'll unmute it, I'll play the sequence again, and I'll just gradually fade on the drum bus so that you can hear what it's doing. So as you can hear, just instant hi-fi. I mean, the drum sound wasn't bad before we added before we added the bus in, but as soon as you start fading it up, it just opens up. You're getting more top and bottom. The transient's really poking through. And as you can see, I'm not smashing it with compression by any means. 3 to 4 dB of compression there, which is, that's just tightening it up. We've got a very low ratio here, 2 to 1. Fast release, slowest attack possible on this particular compressor. So if you just look again, we're really not smashing it. So that's pretty cool. So we'll park that there at that particular level, and we'll move on to the kick and snare bus. Now again, this is being sent at 0. So again, the positioning of my snare and kick faders will have a bearing on how much is being sent to this particular bus. So we'll do what we did with the drum bus, bring it down, and we'll start fading it in. Now, this is one particular functionality that it can absolutely destroy your drum mix if you're too heavy-handed with it. As you can hear, it's exceptionally bright. We're bringing out a lot of 8K. Sometimes as well, I will dial a little bit of bottom end on, but this is really, I would use this very sparingly in a mix. I often find that I get plenty of added brightness from just using the drum bus fader for lifts in the chorus and that kind of thing. This is great for a really dense guitar heavy song, but you can hear with the snare drum there, it just does start to become slightly papery the more that you add on. So we'll try and find a nice blend here and see where we can position it. Yeah, I'd be quite happy parking it there, to be quite honest. I know from having mixed this track that whenever I get into it and we were hitting the loudest parts of the track, the drum bus was slightly louder. It would have been here, and the kick and snare and the loudest section would have been just sitting around here. I know that, so we'll have a listen to what that sounds like. So that's a pretty nice balance. Obviously then, within sections of the songs, maybe I'll automate the reverbs. Maybe for the verses, I'll mute the room verb. Then open it up for the chorus. Something simple like that. It might seem very, very subtle, but it's those little small details that I find that can make a big difference. So that's my approach in a nutshell. I know I haven't really touched any of the individual processing of the tracks. I will do that in the next video, but I just wanted to give people a heads up on what my general approach is, particularly for this heavier style of music. Apologies that I can't play the whole track for you in its final state, but the song hasn't been released yet. But I'll put full details underneath the video, so that if anyone's interested, they can check out the band. I think the release is imminent. We're looking at maybe middle of March, end of March, and it's a really, really good song. Fans of the Foo Fighters will definitely appreciate it, I think. So that's all for now, guys. Thank you very much, and as always, if you have any questions, any suggestions, I'm always willing to listen, and I'll do my best to get back to everybody. So thank you very much. This has been my first time doing a video tutorial. Let's just say that some of the outtakes were fairly interesting, as I was trying to get a hold on it. So I'll be back soon with another updated video, and the next one we'll look at some of the individual processing of each of the tracks. So thank you. I'll speak to you all then soon. Bye bye.